David, are you ready now?
I'm always ready. I'm always ready. I'm excited about today. So, Clint, I have heard your name. So I'm good buddies with Jason Coffey. We met
Yeah, Pecan.
Pensacola.
Good
Yeah,
friends with Pecan. I was just with Pecan, man. We got to kind of spend some time together at the bowl game and pound for pound, maybe not still, but until probably the last 5 years, pound for pound, the strongest guys ever played in Navy.
strongest human being that I
Previously, and
personally.
he doesn't play well. Like he doesn't have like a governor on his strength. So he grabs you and he's like, "Hey," and you're like,
Yeah,
"Dude,
That
stop!"
hurt.
Like it's not that hurts. Like
dude,
lean
I
on,
love
right?
that. I love that you said that because I met him. I don't even remember what we were in Pensacola. He was, I think maybe he was an instructor or something. And I was, I met him and I played linebacker as well at
Yep.
Navy and we just were chit chatting and it just, I started getting to know him better. I'm like, dude, you look like a freakishly strong. And then he's a humble dude,
Yeah.
Jesus lover, super humble guy. And so I had to do a little bit I talked to some buddies like, oh dude, that guy moves
Psych.
weight. That guy moves some
Psych.
weight. Yeah. I
Dude,
didn't know.
I watched him break the leather straps. I think he was hang cleaning like 405 or something. It was 365 or something. And the leather straps broke when he was doing it. And we are just like, nope.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. But his
And
hugs
none of us
hurt,
wanted to
man.
spot him. Like
Everything hurts.
you could hurt yourself trying to spot pick up.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like this is like
That's good.
self-preservation. And you're like, man, I got hurt me trying to help you.
Yeah. That's good, man. I love it. But I there's some different circles that we run in and some other folks we met out in more recently, Jason Hull and then obviously
Yeah.
we had
Yeah.
Robin Pugh on the podcast, and we just your name has come up a lot, and so I'm excited about this conversation today because I've been kind of trying to chase down to meet you for a while, and you're a busy man, which we're going to establish that, but
That's fun.
Your love for vets and just for high performance, just athletes and military in general is a pretty amazing thing. And obviously, I played with Steve Hawley as well.
Yeah.
He was
Lamar.
there. Stu and I were in the same company as Steve, and I played football there. So
Well, Stephen
with him,
Lamar Holly, whose son Trip is playing at Fordham now, playing quarterback at Fordham. And I wrote Trip when Trip was 1 year old. I wrote him a letter, just kind of like a Uncle Clint's kind of charter to life. And basically, I said, like, hey, a lot of people are going to push back on you on this, but you got to hold the line. One, wrestling's real. Two, Bigfoot's real. Three, don't talk to my daughters. And he and my middle daughter two, got a little thing going on, and I'm not happy about it at all. But he has inherited his dad's freakish athleticism. Steven's an incredible athlete, and what makes Steven insufferable is I can take guys that are more talented than me because I'll just outwork you. If you're more talented than me, I'm just outwork you. And every once in a while, you run into a dude who's more talented than you and will outwork you. And you're like, God, this sucks, dude. And that's Steven. Steven's got unbelievable talent, but he's a grinder, and the dude will work, man. And he's like Navy's Matthew McConaughey. He's kind of like he's got, he's
he
like,
is, dude. He so
he's
is.
Navy's Matthew McConaughey. He's like, hey, let's take our shirts off. I'm like, I'm not taking my shirt off next to you. Lost your mind? He's like our own little. He's Navy's Matthew McConaughey. Isn't that just the best way to describe him?
That's good.
That's
Love
good.
that. Well, Clint, for those that don't know you, give us a little background. Tell our audience, who is Clint Bruce and what are you up to these days?
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm, like if you go to my LinkedIn account, it says fortunate, and that's kind of really what it is. I mean, I was born in Arkansas, grew up there, was really kind of shaped in Arkansas, and then moved down to the Dallas Fort Worth area when I was in middle school to Garland, which is a kind of city. The TV show King of the Hill is based on Garland, Texas. And I tell everybody, if you're going to move from Arkansas to Dallas, Garland's the right way to do that. You feel like you're still in Arkansas.
It's
You're just close
close.
to Six Flags and Wet n Wild, and it's just great. I love Garland, and it's a really really cool town. A much more influential. I mean, I think every cowboy hat and every Dixie Cup in America is made. I mean, it's just a really really interesting town from an industrial perspective, and played at a great high school. Had incredible coaches. And really kind of it's so funny. I'm working on this book right now called The Achieving Average, and it's kind of this really, everything I do is for my girls, and if that could be helpful to anybody else, it's great. But I loved football way before football loved me. I mean, I was the fifth string fullback in eighth grade in Brandenburg Middle School in Garland, Texas, which wouldn't have been a big deal, but there were three other fullbacks. So like, it's, do the math on that one. And I remember my dad was like, son, I'm not upset that you're the fifth string fullback. I'm upset they wrote it in the program. I'm like, what? And there's 1, 2, 3 blank, 5 Clint Bruce. And but I always tell people like my gift is not being gifted because I've had to figure it out. I've had to figure out the system, right? I remember I had this little 3x5 card, and I'm pretty sure I still have it. But after another particularly demoralizing practice in the eighth grade, I was at this decision point. I got to decide, like, hey, I'm not gonna play this game because I'm gonna be famous. Like, I got to figure out why I'm gonna play this game because this thing hurts, right? But that's where my friends were, and I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And so I wrote this equation down. I've always called it the achievement equation, and it's simple because if I do a math equation, it's gonna be simple. But it was angles plus allies plus advantages equals achievement. And for me, that's kind of been the formula that's driven everything. Hey, what are the angles? How do I get better at this? Who are my allies? Am I running with people who mean what they say as much as I mean what I say? And advantages are, if I have them, what are they? And how do I complement and augment what they aren't with my allies, right? And so, the beauty of my kind of football story, I tell these young kids that aren't very talented, I was like, hey, man, my gift is not being gifted. Like, first game I ever started was halfway through my junior season because a guy got hurt, another guy got kicked off, and we were up. And but I tell people, like, I played scout team, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th grade. Well, the thing about scout team is you get probably 3 reps for every 1 rep that the talented friends got, and you play these different positions, right? So what I didn't realize was happening is I was amassing this institutional knowledge of the game. Like, I was always, I once said he's a really instinctive player, and I really what I was a very familiar player because I played guard, played center, played, you play all these positions, you just kind of go. And I remember going in that first snap against J.J. Pierce my junior year. I didn't know what the plays were. And it gets worse. Like, people were telling my dad, like, Richard Clinton, and my dad on film, because he's recording it, he goes, Clint's not in. Clint's never in. I can remember now filming y'all's kids, and y'all always give me a hard time.
That's cold, man. That's cold.
It's recorded. It's documented. And all of a sudden you hear this sack made by Clint Bruce, and I kind of never left the field after that. But the story is I stepped out on the field, didn't know what the play was. But I looked at the guard and I said, hey, man, when I played guard on the scout team, if I'm pulling, I sit back on my heels a little bit. So I just shot the gap, right? And I don't know that I love the game. I hadn't played so much and had the pressure of a really talented person my whole life. And so for me, being good at the game was still kind of new to me when I was a freshman at Navy and sophomore. And like, I hadn't borne the burden of being a football player with expectations for all the years that my really, really talented friends have. And that takes a toll, right? But the long road has always been better for me. So, played at a great school here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, had some incredible players with me on that team. And I don't really remember getting recruited by all these schools, but I was recruited by some pretty big schools. And but my dad got sick my senior year, and I remember going in, and we say this pretty commonly now, but I remember going to see my dad in the hospital. My dad was like, "Hey, son, you got to make a 40-year decision, not a 4-year decision about what you do next." So my oldest son, and from that moment on, the whole where I was going to play became totally different to me. And one of the questions I get all the time is like, "Hey, when did you want to be a Navy SEAL?" And I could never really remember the genesis of that. I don't remember when I started wanting to be a Navy SEAL until COVID. When COVID happened, there's nothing good that came of COVID other than I just got unbelievable amounts of time with my kids. And my oldest daughter, I remember one time she goes, "Dad, do you want to watch Magnum PI?" I'm like, "Yeah, I want to watch Magnum PI, 100%." And she turned on the new one. I'm like, "Stop it! Like, we're not watching that. Like, that's." So
I didn't even know there was a new one. I guess it doesn't even exist. There's no reason that there's a new one.
Yeah, and I always went back and watched the original one. And there's a scene, I think it's in the second season, where they revealed that the character Thomas Magnum played football at the Naval Academy and was a Navy SEAL. And all of a sudden, I have this hyper lucid memory of being this chubby little 5th grader in Little Rock, Arkansas, Thursday nights at 8 p.m. and watching Magnum PI with my dad. And I remember turning to my dad, like, "Hey, Dad, I'm playing football at the Naval Academy and being a Navy SEAL." And my dad was like, "All right." And so like it became like this default COA, this default course of action that I think fated me well and served me in ways that I'm only really kind of beginning to comprehend. Like never not have a plan, like a plan. And so ended up going to the Naval Academy, went to NAPS, benefited from that, emotionally, physically, mentally. My dad died at the end of my senior year. And so, you know, that was kind of the place I needed to be, as this kind of cockstrong, big, angry dude that would fight in a drop of a hat. And it had to be virtuous, though. It'd be virtuous, but it was often my interpretation. Like, you look like you're about 602. So like
Virtuous
little minority report. Like, I think you're about to do something mean. So I'm gonna rock you some coolers real quick. And all of a sudden you go to NAPS and there's some dudes that just got done mud stomping Iraq in like 35 minutes and they're staring at you like they want to hurt you. And you're like, I think you can. Like you got this fourth recon gunning with his finger in your chest and he wants to hurt you. And you're like, I've made a serious mistake. What did you ask me to do, Mr. Gunner? Sorry. This is where I needed to be. I needed to be in a place like that. And then I needed our brotherhood. And I get emotional when I talk about this. Like, the brotherhood built and saved me in a lot of ways. In that place and those coaches and those teammates and those experiences, guys like, Bats, Travis Cooley and Ben Fay, who I think is just one of the greatest leaders we've ever had. You just came off the bench in the fourth quarter and won games for us. And his son Hunter is up at the prep school now. And so played at Navy, we were really successful. We had a great senior season. We were successful in 1,000 different ways, but we became successful from a win-loss perspective towards the end of my career. We had great coaches come in, Paul Johnson, Gary Passion, Phil Emery. I think all of us would tell you, was the anchor of our experience in so many ways. And Tommy Ray and Weatherby and all these really, really great coaches that built into us and still look after us and stay in touch with us. And had an opportunity to play in the NFL a little bit. No one knows that because I played the same position as Ray Lewis at the Baltimore Ravens, and he's pretty good. And
he's decent. He's decent. People heard it. People heard it.
And this was '97, so it was his second year, and no one knew he was going to be what he was. But a lot of us like that guy's got potential for something special. And I remember in practice one day going, it might be easier to become a Navy SEAL than be our Ray Lewis. And I was going to go in February. I was going to play the whole season. Got picked up by the team, and then a guy got hurt, and a couple of my classmates said, "Hey, you can start early if you want to." And so for me, the decision was real easy. I was just like, whatever I was going to learn about myself in football was more what I already knew. It was another chapter in a book I've been reading my whole life, and I just got to go where I don't know. And I had no idea if I could make it through SEAL training. And I just you gotta run at the hard things. I'm not going to run towards anything that requires less faith. I'm going to run to places where I know I'm going to need God, and I'm going to be over my skis because that's where you learn, right? And so it was successful. Went through Buzz with a Tom Rhino, who's incredible.
So I played with Dan, and dude, I love Dan.
Were you there when Tom left Dan at practice because Dan? It was Thanksgiving. Do you remember? Because we used to
yeah.
We didn't. So well, it was Tom's younger brother. We get done with practice, and he comes up. He's like, "Hey, can you wait 5 minutes and give me a ride home for Thanksgiving?" And Tom looked at me and goes, "No," and he left. He left his little brother, and his little brother had to find a ride home, which is the most Tom Rhino thing you've ever like. Anybody knows Tom's like, yeah, totally saw that coming. And had great classmates. Checking in the SEAL Team 5. Had an amazing goat locker. I mean, had just some pillars of the frogman community in that, and then had an opportunity to come back out to the NFL in '99 and went to the Saints for a little while and just remembered everything I loved about ball was really more on the battlefield than on the ball field. And that's kind of how I describe my life biographically. Now, one of the questions I get asked a lot, especially about young guys, hey, what's your favorite gun? It's a natural question. There's nothing wrong with it. And I always go, are you asking what my favorite gun is or what my favorite weapon is? And the younger they are, the faster they'll go, it's the same thing. The older they are, the more they maybe intuitively kind of know there's a difference, and they go, and they just kind of wait. And I go, listen, a gun is a tool. A weapon is what I use to win. My favorite weapon is a map. Because if I have a map, I have everything. I know where the bad guy will be. I know what to come in, what to bring, what to leave, how to get home. And if I have a map, the worst I'll ever be is wrong, but I won't be lost. And wrong and lost are different animals, right? And I kind of describe my life biographically as having lived on the ball field, the battlefield, the boardroom, and the breakfast table. We talked about the ball field, we talked about the battlefield. The boardroom is kind of this entrepreneurial endeavor, and the breakfast table is the most important map, and it's the one we're on our whole lives. We're born onto a breakfast table, and sometimes that's great, sometimes it's not. And then we build a breakfast table. And so for me, the ball field and the battlefield and the boardroom are just like topographical layers on top of the breakfast table map. And you have X's on all these maps, but they got to be supportive and complementary to each other. And the way I kind of run my life now is, the ball field, mental, physical health, the boardroom, professional endeavors, and the breakfast table, and all three of them are battlefield. Like every day, at best, my enemy every day is entropy and complacency. Where wars out of active adversaries and enemies on those maps, right? And it's kind of that navigation mindset. I think that a great metaphor for life is being a ship at sea. You can do everything right, and the ocean still has a boat. I mean, the water always wins, right? Like our mountains move on the ocean, right? And so there's a humility that comes with the water as your terrain that I think bears application in life on the whole. And so, did a few years in the teams, didn't do a lot, but I was around some amazing guys, like great Navy football players, like, Beef Drexler and, Tommy Rhino, and, some great guys that as well. And the commandant of the Naval Academy right now is a guy named Walter Allman, who's my classmate, and just an incredible dude. And then got out and just starting businesses. And my bride, who's my ring dance date, she has incredibly strong eye rolling muscles. She accuses my entrepreneurial philosophy. My entrepreneurial philosophy is just get the band back together again, which is kind of true. I mean, it's kind of like, hey, what can I do? But for me, the business model has always kind of been scripture driven. It's like Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds a house, labors work in vain. 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. Do not put on airs. Scholar promotion is due time. He's very careful for you. I wrestle with tremendous insecurity. I think most guys do. I think there's two kinds of men. And all of us have insecurities. There's some of us just talk about them and some of us don't, right? And then Galatians 6:9 is do not go where you're doing is right, and the time of harvesting the benefit. Proverbs 22:29 is you see man excellent in his work and let speak for small and speak for kings. And Proverbs 27:2 is let no one boast for himself, a stranger's lips and not his own. So my deal is like, ask God into it, don't sweat it, do work, be excellent, shut up. And that's just kind of the system, right? And for me, entrepreneurially, Proverbs 22:29 has been powerful because when you come off the ball from the battlefield, what can you use immediately to begin to understand this boardroom map? And the boardroom map for me has always been harder. It's always been more nebulous, more difficult. The high ground has always been a little more mysterious and elusive. The meritocracy doesn't rule in the boardroom as much as it does on the ball field and the battlefield. And there's an ecosystem and an infrastructure you step into on the ball field and the battlefield that you got to build for yourself once you're in a boardroom. And so that's what I love doing. I love, giving the gouge to guys that are, a few years behind me and trying to get them where I am now, decades sooner, if that makes sense. Like, was that your question? I have a little ADHD, so I'm not even sure if I'm tracking with your initial
No, man,
question.
that's great. It's David and I are about 2.5 years removed from getting out of the service. We both did
Yeah,
20 and retired. And we thought we had life figured out.
buddy.
Uh, but we're still not there. I mean,
Those
we're getting
first three to
closer.
5 years after you get out, they can feel a lot like E&E, and that's where the maps analogy really kind of became important for me.
Yeah.
Is for the first time in my life, I'd never felt lost. The most lonely and scared and lost I've ever felt is when I left the ball field and battlefield and I came to the border,
Yeah.
because I was moving on defined and existing maps. And on the ball field, you have coaches and that'll get you as far as you're willing to go and capable of going. And in the battlefield, you have senior enlisted, you have guys that are a little bit ahead of you, and you step into a system, right? And it took me a little while, but what I tell guys now is look at the best way to look at the boardroom is the best way you look at the first 5 years after you get out is like a TDY, like an IA. It's
Mm.
another command, right? Like you don't know enough about what you want to do to commit to a particular platform. And the analogy I tell guys is industry is terrain, companies are weapon systems, leaderships are teammates, right? And
Mhm.
because we're used to making decisions like that. When you look at mortgage or finance or commercial real estate, it's just a terrain. Like technology is Arctic. The parallels bear out, and you look at these companies as a ship or a platform or a weapon system, and uh and they're not really that different. But I tell people, like, hold those first 5 years after you get out loosely, and look at them as an IA or a PC, a TDY or branch transfer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There's
that's my
something.
encouragement to you guys.
No, I love it, man. There's something that I was watching an interview that you did a while back, and you'd said something that was really insightful and has stuck with me, and I think it'd be good for others to hear. And there's a follow-on question with that, but I'll just read what you wrote because I wrote it out. You said be around people who get what I don't know how to
Yeah,
see, and figure out what I know and how to do for them today, so I can learn from them on what I can do tomorrow.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I love that. Like, just, hey, be around people who know more than me, right? And figure out what I know, how I can help them, and then go learn what I need to do in the future. And so, like, the question with that is some of us, I mean, 42-year-old man, 20 years in the Navy,
yeah,
knows what he does in the Navy, but has no idea what he's good at, what he knows how to do, what his strengths are,
yeah,
and like what his qualities are. And we had a call the other day, last week, in our men's group, and one of them, similar track, like getting out, figuring out what he wants to do. He's like, how do I know what I'm good at? Like,
yeah,
how, what
yeah,
what are my strengths? Like, I don't know, right? Like, how do you coach someone
yeah.
through that?
So one, I love that. I love the kind of the authenticity it takes to kind of acknowledge that internally, because we have a lot of high expectations of ourselves. Like, we're
Yeah,
ruthless on ourselves when we think we're lost because we're leaders, and so if we're lost, everyone else is lost too, right?
right.
But we're also not very fair with ourselves. Like we expect ourselves to perform at the level, 05, 06, year one, year two, when we hit this new map, right? And the reality is, and so, like, my facility down here, you probably heard about, we call it the Highground. And the Highground is like it's like a warrior we work. It's a multi it's a co-working facility for veteran and athlete led companies. And the reason I call it the high ground is because metaphorically and literally, the high ground is kind of where you always want to be, right? It's the place of perspective, it's the place of kind of shared principles and advantage, right? But what I tell people is, like, the hard skills it takes to get to the high ground on the ball field and battlefield are unique, right? From the hard skills it takes to get on the high ground on the border. But the soft skills immediately export. And that's why I love being around people who are leading at really high levels, because one, I get to learn from them, and two, I get to realize that there's a percentage of what they do that I already know how to do. Like, I ask guys this all the time. We go, hey man, what's the difference between a 15,000 foot peak in South America and North America? And we're so, like, intense. We're thinking about it, and I'll go, like, nothing. It's 15,000 feet, man. 15,000 feet is 15,000 feet. Doesn't matter what continent you're on, right? And so the first thing we got to realize is those soft skills and experiences that we gain on the ball field and the battlefield export immediately to the boardroom. It's just a question of application and platform and where we deploy those things. And the private sector acknowledges that and realizes that maybe better than we do, right? And to kind of bear this map analogy out further, I go, as from my land-based, war daddies, I go, hey, listen, a map of the ocean is a map. We just called it chart, right? But it's still a map, right? And there's equivalencies. Like, a fathom is 6 feet. I mean, there's these. So what is the language and the lexicon of this map? And once you figure that out, you'll realize that you're not lost. You're probably not even as wrong as you thought you were. But it's just like stepping into a new command. It's like my buddies that kind of come out of the aviation community. There's some principles that of flying that are relevant whichever platform you're going to. Like, you go from rotor wing to fixed wing, there's some parallels for sure, but it's not seamless. There's some fundamentals that are absolute. Lift is really important, and but there's some, but it's the same thing. And we got to tell ourselves that, because we got to be honest with ourselves and say, hey, listen. I tell guys most of them, like, hey, as long as you're not lost. If you're not lost, then at worst you're wrong, and you might not even be wrong. You might just be early, right? And surrounding myself with people who get what I don't know how to say allows me to kind of see that. And I love being around people who know more than me. One, it's going to happen anyway. Like I think I'm the lowest ranked Naval Academy graduate to ever get a SEAL billet by probably hundreds of academic positions. Like I don't think it's even close, right? Um, so I get nervous if I'm the smartest person in the room. One, it never happens, and two, if it happens, I'm in the wrong room because I'm about to get us all killed, right? And so like you know, running around with people that have scars that I don't. I just said this with some of the Ohio State guys. I said, man, I got to be around this living library because what I want to, the gift I want to give you guys is the ability to remember what I had to learn the hard way, right? Because remembrance is faster than learning. And I was working with this UFC fighter the other day. I said, hey, man, if you and I are fighting and I'm remembering and you're learning, I'm going to win because remembering is faster than learning. And he got to look at me like metaphorically, like he like, I'm not going to win, but metaphorically, you know, it's like we both know. And, but yeah, I mean, we got to be not patient with ourselves because I don't think that's necessarily in our nature, but we got to be honest with ourselves. Like, how long did it take you to become really good at flying a bird, right? And yet all of a sudden you step out. Like, were you an excellent aviator 2.5 years after you graduate from Navy? No. But you expect yourself to be an excellent business person 2.5 years. Like, how long did it take us to get good at football, Dave? Like, when you think about how long it took you to get good at football, were you as good as you ever were 2 years after you started playing football? No.
And I was never really very good anyways, but yeah, I get your point.
I appreciate the humility. I don't believe you, but you know, but the reality is like it's a new map. And so we got to be realistic with ourselves and how long it's going to take us to be at the high ground. And then we got to be chasing the right people, man. I have this kind of chase, pace, and pull mentality. Like most time, I think you got to sit down and ask yourself, hey, what does life look like if I catch what I'm chasing? Right? Like, look at the whole thing. I always tell my daughters, like, if you're gonna compare anything, compare everything. If you're gonna compare the house, compare the loveless marriage, right? If you're gonna compare, like, you got to look at the whole thing. You don't get to pick and choose, right? And so most time when you compare everything, you'll find that you're probably happy where you are, right? I tell people the grass isn't greener, it's grass. You know, it's like, and all of a sudden you jump over the fence, oh, my grass is greener. Like, and so for me, it's like, you know, chase the right people to the right place. That's how you get to the high ground, regardless of map we're talking about. The formula to get to the high ground, regardless of map we're talking about, is chase the right people to the right places and become your version, what you love about them. Not them 2.0, your version. It's like Paul, Timothy, Barnabas, right? And you got to be keeping pace. You got to keep pace with people that are going to leave you behind if you don't put out, if you don't do your job. You got to have the ruthless accountability of truth tellers. And I always say, like, hey, the more talented you are, the more important it is that you surround yourself with truth tellers, because the world will tell a talented man anything he wants to hear, right? So you got to be around dudes that'll tell you the truth. That's what I love about the weights. I love about the weight room because the weights tell you the truth, man. Like, you can lift it or you can't lift it, right? And you got to be around dudes that'll tell you the truth. And then you got to chase, pace, and you got to pull. You got to pull someone behind you, or you're going to be doing the thing longer than you want to, or longer than you're good at it. And both of those are a disservice to the thing, whatever the thing is, right? And so we grow up in that. That's an ecosystem we inhabited on the ball field and the battlefield. And I'm just telling you, it works in the boardroom, and it is the primary mission on the breakfast table, right? Like, there's probably a million people. There's probably a million people that know that I just want to be the kind of guy my girls want to marry one day. You know, I paint myself in the corner of the person I say I want to be. And they know that man's purposeful, passionate, protective, and a provider. And if he's not those four things, I'm not going to have to scare him off because my girls aren't going to want him. And if he is those four things, I'm still going to scare him off, man. It's my girls, man. Like, 2 men in or 1 man leave kind of thing. So, yeah, man, I'm a big fan of looking at life as like a patrol route or a nav plan, right? And, you know, I think our experience on the battlefield serves us well because we have an expectation of deviation when it comes to nav plans and patrol routes, right? Things just change. Mountains that weren't there are there, and that's what dead reckoning is, and that's what waypoints are. Like, there's not a single ship that's gone from point A to point B. You just kind of, and that's what life really is. And so, those map analogies are really, that's how I talk to myself. And so it's kind of what I share with other people.
Yeah, I love that, man. There's a lot there, a lot of you got my brain going in a ton of directions. But that last point that you said too, the idea of going from point A to point B in a straight line, and just that it be seamless, that it be I'm at the level. I was talking to somebody yesterday, and we were talking about the talents, and he was just working through the idea of, man, this is where I really want to be. And I was like, man, that's beautiful, and I love it, and I love the goals, and that's a great aspiration. But at the end of the day, look at the talents. Like maybe you're a 5 talent person right now,
Yeah.
and maybe that's just the reality. But here's the thing. I think Jesus, he just kind of stopped the analogy, the 1, the 5, the 10. But I think there's a 20 talent, there's a 30 talent, and it just requires us to. The door's never going to be open to the 10 talent unless you do the work and you're diligent about the 5 talent.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a 1 talent, maybe you're like me and you're a 1 talent, but if you're diligent and you're faithful, then the door opens to that 5 talent, and you don't recognize it. And you don't recognize it by sitting there just wishing you're a 10 talent. You realize it by, oh man, God is okay. I'm being diligent.
That for me is why the achievement equation has always been so important to me. And I've always told the girls, I'm like, listen, saying you can't is not humility. If anything, saying you can't is the peak of arrogance. Because when you say I can't, what you're really saying is I know everything I need to know about myself and everything I need to know about the thing, which is kind of a pretty bold statement. Like, I'm a 50-year-old dude and I'm still learning about myself. So when you say I can't, you're speaking with such absolute knowledge as though you know everything you need to know. And that's what adventures are for, right? And so for me, that angles plus allies plus advantages is a big deal. It's a formula, it's a process. And like, I mean, listen, that was one of the secrets, I think, of our success on the football field, and the current success is like, we know often there's going to be a delta in advantages. And I'd find, I'm very specific. So for me, advantages are talent and treasure. And they go, in time, I go, no, because all talent and treasure do is give you more time. Time is the kind of this finite absolute that we're all dealing with. It's the one constant. Like, we haven't agreed on anything as a human species other than the day cycle. 24/7, 365. We haven't agreed on anything since this. So it's really the only absolute, right? Like, even these places where the sun doesn't set for 6 months at a time, they still go by 24/7, 365, right? And so all allies and angles and advantages are is about harvesting time, like this one advantage. So us in Notre Dame, we had 60 minutes on the clock, right? And what I know is, like, advantages are only 1/3 of the equation. So if you've got advantages, but I've got angles and allies, I got a chance, right? Like, I've got a majority chance. And so for me, angles are about reducing all inefficiencies, precision. The calculus of winning a gunfight is like, we don't miss as much. And as much as you think that's important, but here's a supply chain of that. If I don't miss as much, I don't have to carry as much. If I don't have to carry as much, I'm not as tired as you are when we start fighting. Like, there's a supply chain of this whole thing, right? And allies are all about delegation. Like, hey, who's better than this than I am, right? And that's what I love about when I talk about adversities. I go, hey, listen, advantages are real. They're 1/3 of the equation, but adversity collides with talent, and one of 3 things always happens. That advantage is affirmed. Hey, I'm as good as I thought I was. I'm as strong, fast, smart as I thought I was. The second thing is it's revealed. Hey, I didn't know I could, right? Like, and we learn, necessity is the mother of invention, right? I don't know a single person that's doing even an old thing a new way. And we're doing new things all the time, right? And the third thing that's happened is it gets crushed. Like, you get demolished, right? But if the mission matters more than you, what happens is you're picking yourself and dusting yourself off. You're looking amongst your allies going, hey, that was easier for you than it was for me. You do it next time, right? Like, you do that next time. And that's what I love about football and these team sports is, it's either an attrition or a reassignment model, right? Like, hey, I want to play running back. And then I'm slow and I'm chubby and I'm angry, so I don't dodge. I just run right into guys. And so I'm at an attrition or an assignment. Like, I either get out or I get reassigned to another position, right? And I remember my dad came up to me. He goes, son, if you don't have the athletic ability to score touchdowns, and you don't, I'm like, well, that's kind of your fault, man. And he goes, if you don't have the athletic ability to score touchdowns and you don't, be the one who stops those guys. I'm like, well, who does that? He goes, linebackers. So I'm like, and I was like, man, aggression is the leading. I was like, I'm done. I'm all in. Like, like my little brother's a really gifted athlete. He could have played almost any position on the football field. I could play linebacker. My future was professional wrestler, football player, roadie for like an 80s hair band that's still kicking it. You know, or something else, right? But again, it's that is I would match my advantages against adversity and take notes. And you know, and I think that's the beauty of the kind of the ruthlessness or the urgency of the ball field and the battlefield is that truth is we have these short horizons. And I think that's the other thing that makes the boardroom more difficult. If we look at the mechanics of these maps that we lived on, the horizons you're looking at on the ball from the battlefield are pretty immediately. I mean, you get this return on effort pretty fast. As a football player, every 7 seconds, you know, you get it on a snap, and you go to sidelines, and then and on the battlefield, we get these really fast feedback loops, right? And then, but for me, going to the boardroom was like flying into a fog bank without an instrument panel, right? Like that's why I love so much about aviator. I mean, rotor wing aviators scare me more than this by design. I think you guys are like, hey, let's make that chubby guy throw up. And like those 160th dudes, like, is he throwing up yet? And I'm like, yeah, I'll fake it. Just stop this, right? But it's like the analogy I use, not being an aviator, so correct me if I'm wrong. It's like you're flying nap of the earth, you know, contour navigate, and also you can fly into a cloud bank. And if we don't have an instrument panel, and that's what for me going to the boardroom felt like, right? And so for me, what I had to do is I had to create this instrument panel. And for me, I remember I was at my office and I had this. The way I say it is, there's a difference between being here and being home. Here's geography. Home is knowing why you're here. That's a different, and everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this reinvention, recalibration, where they got to figure out who they are now, right? And what happens to us, to athletes and veterans, is we have to do it later when there's less margin. Like if you want to be in the NBA and all of a sudden ninth grade, like you're done growing, like that forced recalibration is imposed on you. But also we're in our 30s and our 40s, and it's got to happen. And it's not that it's any. It's more. It's as there's just less margin. Like you got three. You know, you got kids and all these other things. You don't have the margin of rediscovery and reinvention. And you know, I remember I was in my office and I was like, man, I'm here, but I'm not home. And this was years after I got out. And I remember we have a hostage rescue facility here in the office, and my bride calls my office the Honor Lost Boys. She goes, listen. I said, what are you talking about? She goes, if a 14-year-old was in their office waiting for her mom to come pick them up, it would look like your office. I'm like, yeah, well, your office would be pretty and smell nice. And she's kind of right. And I go, but I stand outside the sheet house and I was like, all right, I'm here, but I'm not home. And everyone I love is on the other side of that door. And I got to get through that door. So how do I get through the door? And all of a sudden I said, I got to go C4. C4 is amazing. Like you can cook with it, you blow stuff up. I just love C4. But it became an acrostic for me. And what C4 became is a checklist: career, compete, contribute, and have a catalyst. Because what I began to realize in my late 30s was my career at its peak, where I was most satisfied and fulfilled as a person. My career was competing against other athletes, against our nation's adversaries. My career was contribution, was a form of service, right? And my career demanded that I have a catalyst, that I get better every day. But all of a sudden, I was burdening the boardroom with providing the satisfaction that only all four of those things could do. So I've got probably 2 years of a daily checklist, and it was C, career, compete, contribute, have a catalyst, you know. And it was ones and zeros because I'm either too harsh or too generous. So did I go to work? Because I can't have a good day if I don't go. Ones and zeros. Like, did I compete in something or train to compete in something? And that, in some ways, was kind of the birth of Carry the Load, a physically hard thing that you had to get ready for. You just get to show up and do it. And then, you know, and then contributions, did I help someone that couldn't help me? You know, as close to altruism as I could get it. And catalyst was like gaining a new skill. And I have 2 years of 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. Because feelings are real, but feelings respect data. And what I had to do is I had to create that instrument panel. I don't know. I'll say VFR or IFR. I don't know which one it is. It's just, whichever one sounds cool. You know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're saying.
But it was the tool I used to come all the way home. And it took me agonizingly longer than it should have. And but for the grace of God and a Proverbs 31 woman and this brotherhood that we have and friends that are friends and not just buddies. I mean, I found out. I'll send you a video of the story they did on Amy and I. And I love it because it really tells Amy the girl stories. But I noticed when I first got out, my friends were just having layovers in Dallas more than I thought they would. Hey, we're going to train. We had a layover, and what I didn't realize at the time was my bride was calling, and she's like, hey, "I'm worried about Clint." And all of a sudden, like beef would show up, or Eric Frohart, or these guys like, "Yeah, we just had a layover," and they would let me know that they still love me, and I'm grateful for that. And that's how you know you're not lost, right? When you got those allies, when you keep in pace with people that are going to tell you the truth, and sometimes the truth is good.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I had those coaches. I was really good at pointing out the bad plays. I didn't need any help finding the bad plays. But I had coaches like Dick Bumpus, Tommy Ray, that would make me watch the good plays too. And they're like, "Hey man, did you or did you not make that sack? Or did you or did you not make that tackle?" There was no did you or did you not make that interception. Like pass defense was not a real big strong part of my game, but I had coaches that forced me to see my positives, and that's what uh, brothers will do. They'll make you confront yourself with the goodness that's in you too. And we all wrestle with guilt. And I was talking to a great friend the other day. I said, "Hey man, you feel guilty?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's because you're good." He goes, "What?" I said, "Only the good wrestle with guilt. Like it's if you feel guilty, it's because you're good. Like you have to acknowledge your goodness if you're wrestling with guilt, because evil doesn't concern itself with guilt." And so there's an irony here in that you feel bad, but because you feel bad, it means you're good. And you got to wrestle with that, right? And one of the other reasons I say I got to be around people who get what I'm trying to say before I know how to say it is there's a point in our lives where it's better for us to listen to other people than ourselves. Like I was with a big football team the other day. I said, "Man, I wouldn't let anybody talk to me the way I talk to me. Like I wouldn't let anybody talk to me the way I talk to me." And that's not okay. Like I got to think about that. Like, wait, you wouldn't let anybody talk to you the way you talk to you? So, so either you need to let other people talk to you that way, or you need to stop talking to yourself that way, right? And you know, these are the scar tissue. You know, I say, hey man, elites share their scars and they preach from their pain, and our scars on us or we on them, and the way we know them is we can talk about them. And authenticity is what you call vulnerability when you're not scared anymore. It's vulnerability when you're scared. It's
That's
authenticity when
good.
you're not. And the aviation community is, I think, the best at this. Aviation and EOD, they are the best at AARs, and because you don't make mistakes at 1,000 miles per hour, and you don't make mistakes with things that go boom, right? Like, and so exporting, and again, this is what I said earlier, guys. Those soft skills and experiences that got you the high ground on the ball from the battlefield, they export seamlessly. You just change the words, man, but it means the same thing. So
Mhm.
you're more ready than you know, and you're more familiar than you realize, and be encouraged by that.
I have a question about once you're in the boardroom, and
Yeah,
David and I saw a little bit of this in ourselves and in others as well. And we were high pace, high performance, running hard, building businesses, so focused on creating, building wealth. We built some real estate companies, and we were working hard, but we lost focus on what we said was a priority in our life,
yeah,
our family, our friends, having fun, our faith, and we got so focused in honed in on this boardroom that we lost touch with the breakfast table.
sure, sure, yeah, yeah. That's why you got to have this concurrent map mentality, right? Like
Mhm.
you never flew a thing with just the topography of the map, right? Like,
Right.
and so again, it's just creating that dashboard, that fused dashboard that we abided by. And here's what I'll tell you: like, if there's time on the clock, you're still in the fight. And so sometimes we got to hold mistakes loosely once we learn from them, right? And I say, hey, shame is a shovel that Satan will use to bury you. I mean, he just loves it, right? And for me, I'm pretty intentional about what shame is. And again, I go back to time. I don't have an issue with regrets. People say I have no regrets. I'm like, well, that's dumb. That just means you didn't. Like for me, regrets are all that I wish I would have, I wish I wouldn't have, I wish I would have sooner, like all these other things. And that's mining a mistake. When we mine that mistake, that's called regret. But every second after we've mined that mistake for every ounce of value is shame. So revisiting those mistakes that we learn from in at a depth and an intensity that there's no value in, like we are wasting time. And so shame is the shovel that Satan will use when we marinate on a mistake that we've already mined for full value, and then we move on, right? Like, you know, the athlete's greatest gift is a short memory, right? And, but that's really just during the game. You know, after the game, you watch film and you learn from it a little bit more, but you don't spend time on it. And we got to remember, I always tell this to my girls. I'm like, hey, the human machine, this is not scientific, by the way. Not that I thought any of y'all assumed I was going to, do some more. But for me, I always say the human machine has four performance systems with the body, the brain, the mind, and the soul. For an analogy perspective, the body is a car, the brain is a steering wheel, the mind is a driver, and the soul is his inherent sense of end state, right? The body and the brain are just machines, and they abide by machine-like principles. And just like we did on the ball field and the battlefield, we got to cultivate a mind that can impose its will for a period of time over the body and the brain. In the body and the brain, they're very binary. If the brain doesn't know it's going to be okay, it's convinced we're going to die. And that keeps us alive. Like monkey brain keeps us alive, right? And we got to create this context, and we got to create these things that remind us we're not going to die, right? And so for me, to have again, that's what the achievement equation is. It's a process, it's a checklist, it's a pre-flight, pre-adventure, pre-dive, whatever you want to call it, pre-fight kind of checklist, right? Just like I did on the football field, just like I did on the battlefield. And what I think you'll find is you'll find yourself feeling at worst wrong but not lost. And the reality is, if there's time on the clock, you're still in the fight. And so we mourn mistakes, we mind mistakes, but we move on quickly because we're stealing time from those we love and depend on us most, when we hyper fixate on a mistake we made, right? I had this kind of concept called championing. You put an ing on the end of anything, you make it a verb, right? Like so if you're doing championships over and over again, that's championing, right? And so, and I've been really fortunate to be around some amazing organizations. Like I got to work with the U.S. Women's National Team when Jill Ellis was coaching them, when they won that award. And that's the only thing my daughters think are cool. My daughter's like, you work with the U.S. Women's National Team and you know the Vineyard Vines guys. And I was like, there's some other cool stuff behind that. They're like, yeah, whatever. And, but I always say, like, hey, when you're dealing with really elite championship organizations, there's always four things. There's passion, talent, precision, and endurance. And the higher up you go, the less passion and talent matter. And it's not because they don't matter, it's just everybody's got it. Everybody's got passion and talent, right? So the difference is precision and endurance. And for me, I define precision maybe differently than other people. For me, precision isn't being right more, it's being wrong less. I mean, I think that's a more faithful way to articulate what really happens. Like, because there's entropy, there's fatigue, there's, doubt, there's all these, and I hate when people, he gets stronger as the game goes on. Like, no, he doesn't. No one gets stronger as the game goes on. You're just seeing someone who degrades more slowly. So precision is being wrong less, and endurance is being wrong less and longer in competition. And I was working with a really, really Super Bowl coach, and he was at practice one day, and he goes, "Make no mistakes." And I kind of flinched when he saw it. He sees everything. He's just a student of humanity. And we're walking off the practice field, and he goes, "Hey, Clint, when I said make no mistakes, you flinched." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "Listen, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm not. I haven't done what you've done, so I don't know if it applies." But I said, "But these guys are geniuses. Like they're all geniuses. They're all physical geniuses, and more of them are intellectual geniuses than they know. Just their ability to comprehend, archive, reconcile at the pace they do. And I mean, there's the wiring for genius is there. Otherwise, and I said, in the special operations community, I was around geniuses all the time. They're all genius. And the worst thing you could do is deny yourself the creativity of genius. You stifle creativity when you say make no mistakes. I said, I would always tell my guys make new mistakes because I want to avail myself to the creativity and innovation of genius. And so when I say make new mistakes, what I'm saying is like do the thing you do. Like if you're Barry Sanders, you're running back, you have two plays: Barry run left, Barry run right. And you just take notes. You're like, oh, or this Genty kid out of Boise State is just incredible. Or Saquon Barkley. Saquon run left, Saquon run right. Just take notes. And you see stuff, you're like, okay, other guys can run that. That's a play. And they're like, nah, it's just Saquon. The reverse hurdle, like that's not a play. That's just, Saquon. And but when you say make new mistakes, you're giving genius permission to create, but you're demanding that they're a pro. Because in order to make new mistakes, what do you got to do? You got to know everything about your old ones, right? And so for me, I think anything that we say to others, we ought to say to ourselves as well. So hey, I'm not going to make no mistakes. My name's not Jesus, but I'm going to try to make new ones. And even if I make mistakes repetitively, there's generally something different within that supply chain of the mistake. I mean, and so it's not this, I can't tell you how many arguments have been with my wife in the almost 28 years we've been married and 30 years together. But there's always like a little bit of a difference, right? So what I do differently, and I try to be intensely practical. Yeah, I remember I was with a football team, and there's this really guy named Todd Heap. He was a great tight end, really great tight end. And he was with Arizona, and he goes, he's about to become a dad, and he goes, "Hey Clint, how do I make sure I'm as good a dad as I'm as a tight end?" I'm like, "What are the reps?" And it's kind of one of these extemporaneous questions where you feel a little bit like a hypocrite because you're answering it real time and you're realizing you don't do it either. I said, well, there's reps. You mass these reps and you rehearse them, you perform under pressure. So what are the reps to being a dad, right? What are the reps to being a husband? And I was flying home that day. I was like, I'm going to be a lead husband. I went to my bride and I said, babe, I'm gonna do 10,000 things that a lead husband does. I said, I don't know if I've done 10,000 things. She said, you haven't. I'm like, well, I wasn't asking you. I was saying, perhaps maybe I'm like, but here's the reps. And I go, hey, I'm gonna take you on a trip once a quarter. And I started listing these 5 things because my lists only have 5, like, because this has got to do this, right? So, and she goes, these are for me. And I go, yeah. She goes, should I tell you what they are? I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, right? And she goes, listen, I'd love to go on a trip once a quarter, but can you just not be a jackass when you come home from work? I'm like, don't be. I told you that. But guys, I'll tell you, if you're in my life, my wife and I go every year, I go, hey, give me 3 and I'm going to choose 2. And these are the 3 things I let her know she's mine. And the way she wants me to, and then 2 ways the way I want me. And it's right here, man. It looks like an off-season weight program. Like I count the reps. If I want to be an elite daddy, I'm going to ask my girls, like, how do I love you in a way that lets you know you're mine? And here's your 3, and then I pick 2, and my bride, and like my bride's yelling at me. I'm like, well, I haven't gotten a rep in like a week. Like I know it, right? But we were raised in a weight room, and we know how to do these things. And that's why, again, I tell you, like, you're closer to the high ground than you know, or at least how to get to it. Because these things that got you the high ground involved in the battlefield, there's a meaningful percentage, 70 to 80% of them apply. And that's why I love putting CEOs around. Like we have a shoot house here, and a CEO is intimidating if you're like a 23-year-old Lance Cooley, right? And he's a CEO of a company. All of a sudden you sit in a shoot house, and that CEO's like, hey man, what do I do? Like this 23-year-old Lance Cooley's like, just do this. And what happens is this equilibrium sets in. And everybody just kind of realizes, like, you're just a dude, right? And that's that Proverbs 22:29. And for me, because what happens is this CEO is like, man, if I just prove myself as a man, I wouldn't have these issues. And this guy's already like, if I just had his money, I wouldn't have these issues. And then they kind of realize it's neither one of those things. And so, like, for me, the high ground is what I call an apex predator watering hole for broken mighty men and rich young rulers, both of us on what the other side of what we thought God was. And I'm just kind of sitting there smiling. And guys, I was like, hey man, there's a hole in your soul that only God can fill. And we had a great pastor, and he talked about this, the rich young ruler talking to Jesus. And throughout my childhood, whenever I heard that conversation, for me, it was like an immediate, like, hard pushback by Jesus to the rich young ruler. But our pastor, JP, who's down in Waco now, he goes, I don't think that's what it was like. I think Jesus looked at him and goes, oh man, there's nothing you can do. You can get a camel through the eye of a needle, like, but that's why I'm here. I'm here so you don't have to do that. And like, it was this gentle reproof. And the minute I heard that, I was like, oh, right. Like, there's so much I don't have to do because Jesus did, right? And It's not about giving myself a pass because of that. It's just like, for me, there's lost, and then there's wrong, and there's home. And I've always said there's no X on the map you get to where everything's great. There's no house, spouse, car, job. What I believe is there's X's on a map worth going to and people worth going with. And you bounce around towards Jesus till you meet him. And once you realize that, you give yourself permission to kind of, one, know that this place isn't heaven. John 16:33, we'll have, like, this place isn't heaven. And the more we try to make this place heaven, the closer it comes to becoming an idol. And God's really clear on what he does with idols, right? God has a habit of giving us what we think we want. We saw it when Israel's like, we want a human king. God's like, I want to be your king. No, we want a human king. God's like, I'll give you what the world would say is the best king ever. Here's Saul, 6'3", beautiful, and he's going to give you the best a man can get you, right. And so for me, I mean, like, guys, just you're not lost on any of the maps, and you're probably not even as wrong as you think you are. What you are is new, and you might just be early. And that's why you got to surround yourself with people who've been on this map longer than us. Like 101 in special operations, if you're going to a new place, you take an indigenous guide. That gal in Predator, like, to the chopper, do it now. Like she's why they all didn't die, right? She knew how to get to the chopper. But we all need that. And that's why we shouldn't be alone. And that's why I love, like, whatever jobs you're doing now, just be where you want to build your family and around someone you can learn from. And then try your hardest, because profit isn't purpose, no matter how much we try. Now, profit's important. Like, profit is bullets. More bullets, bigger targets, right? You can't down targets without it. But in and of itself, I mean, having bullets just to have bullets, you get made fun of in our community if you come back with all your bullets every time. You're like, oh, you didn't get any fights, did you? Unless it's your recon, because recon's different, right? But yeah, I listen. I could go. I want to be good with y'all's time, and I mean, I could talk about
Likewise.
this stuff all day long, man. So I apologize if I rambled a little bit, but if you know anybody who knows me, they should have told you there's high.
No, man, I've got my pen and paper here. I'm just taking notes. I'm just putting quotes and stars and underlines and all kinds of stuff. I'm just
Well, let's
I'm
do it
just here
again,
for
man.
you.
I mean, listen, that's the cool thing about this technology thing is we just, if I can add value, I'm happy to come back on. I love what you guys are doing. I mean, you're giving people a terrain fam. You're giving folks the gouge. And I tell guys all the time, I was like, hey, if you have my scars, one of two things happened. Either I'm a coward and I didn't share my scars with you, or you're a knucklehead because I told you and you did it anyway. Now, I will confess you have plenty of scars, exactly where good men told me I'd have them. I'm like, yeah, but I'm Clint Bruce. And I come back 2 weeks later, I'm like, apparently being Clint Bruce doesn't mean anything. It
Doesn't mean
might make
jack.
it worse, right? So that's just being a man. That's just being a dude whose name isn't Jesus, right?
Love it.
But I'm proud of what y'all are doing, and I'd love to be helpful if I can.
Yeah, thanks, brother. This was amazing. I appreciate it. Um, Hey, where do people find out more about everything you're doing? We didn't even get into any of the businesses and companies that you're running and all the
Well,
amazing
that's
stuff.
just
Like,
his derivative, man. That's just
yeah,
the platforms and all this other stuff. We've talked the most about the most important thing is
cool.
the angles, allies, advantages, and the X's on the map and where we're going. I have an Instagram account. My daughter's told me that. It's called Real Clint Bruce. I got to figure out how to log into it.
Nice.
LinkedIn's probably the best
Cool.
way. There's clintbruce.com, but it's just super weird to me. I just did that so the Chinese don't take it. And Communist Party Chinese, not Chinese,
Sure.
the Communist Party Chinese. And but yeah, I mean LinkedIn, and then I'll send you a link to other things. But I built an app. No, that's what I need to tell you. Well, let's be clear. I didn't. Clint's not over here coding or anything. But
You got somebody else smarter than you to do it.
I'll send you a link to this app that we
All right.
built, because I hate social media, but I love staying in touch with people. And so this app is just how we stay in touch with people. Because I'm just not the guy that thinks everybody cares what I think. But if you're on this app, then you do, and I'm happy to share. So I just read. There's a scene in Chronicles of Narnia that was incredibly profound to me as a young man, and I read it to my daughters as I was growing up. And it's the scene where all the kids realize that Aslan's a lion, and they're kind of coming to that awareness. And she's like, Aslan's a lion. Is he safe? And Beaver's like, course he's not safe. He's a lion, but he's good. And for me, um, safe is dangerously close to apathy and appeasement and accommodation. And those things are gentle forms of permission, right? And so for me, it's not about being safe, it's about being good. Um, and so I share stuff like that on there. And that's probably the best way if I had to give you an answer.
Awesome. Well, yeah,
I'll send you
send
that
that to
link. I'll
me.
send you that link and you can put it wherever smart people put
Appreciate it.
things when they
Do
do
that
these
for the.
podcasts.
I'm my daughter and I are currently reading the Chronicles of Narnia series.
That's it.
I'm on number 4, Prince Caspian. I'm loving it, dude.
I'll give
Loving
you
it.
one last thing to do before we get off. Well, no, this is that you asked me a question for the second session. I'll tell you what I'm about to tell you in this second session thing you told me
Sounds
about.
good. Cool. Guys and gals, hey, reach out to Clint. We'll put all his information in the show notes. And man, thank you for your time, Clint. Appreciate it.
Thanks for this. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you guys.
Yeah,
Man.
thank you, Clint. Thank you, bud. Hey, just word of encouragement to you, Clint. Man, you know, I'm sitting here and I'm just listening to these stories and also, you know, the profound nature of a lot of, you know, the maps and the X's, like even what you said, you know, there's X's on the map that are places worth going with and people worth going with, right? It just, you know, some of these ideas that you're sharing and the fact that you've lived them out, there are people that you have impacted and influenced. You know, it's funny, and I'll just tell you this for me personally, I've known your name for years, coming on decades. I've known your name, and it wasn't just Navy football and the Navy football circles and what you and Cooley and that 96 defense. Just I think you guys were like ranked number 5 defense in the country, something crazy. I mean, it was just a
you know, we were it was cool. It was neat to be a part of that with, you know, Dick Bumpus, you know,
yeah, Dick Bumpkiss. I mean, just a
yeah.
lot of names in the brotherhood that I've known, but I've been more impressed by the influence off the field and with the excuse me, with the impact off the field. And so God bless you, brother. And there's going to be lots of people in heaven thanking you, man.
Thank you for that. That's humbling, man. And stay in touch and let me know how I can be helpful. Hold fast and stay true and ever onward. There's time on the clock. You're still in the fight, man.
Appreciate you,
Love
brother.
it. Thanks, Clint.
You got
See
it.
ya.